All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
It is Memory of Light. We are probably on our second to last episode. This is the first chapter after the last battle,
Hmm.
except I don't know why he did it this way because we have several chapters that are still last battle and they're actually of the same pacing and writing style as that big,
Hmm.
giant, long chapter. So he should have probably just extended that chapter or broken up the other one.
Yeah, why not? Because the first several that we're going to go over here really are, to your
Exactly the
point,
same.
exactly the same. It's very quick cuts. Um, a little less so with where we're going to start, which is chapter 38, because it does cut a few times away from Rand, but it is mostly flowing with what's going on with Rand, which I kind of like. I think it really works, and there's some interesting stuff there. But then we're going to cut off uh, after chapter 44 because chapter 45 is kind of the second finale, the second climax, if you will, because it's the ending of all the fighting that's going on around Shal Ghul, around
Mhm.
Thakandar itself. And so there should be some finale thoughts there, and also some gee, how did that happen and what the hell happened there kind of moments. um I didn't have a ton of thoughts going through here. These chapters, and maybe it's because we've spent so long with the actual the last battle chapter, but a lot of what's going on here was kind of what I thought I'd end up doing in that last battle chapter, which is stuff is happening, there's a lot of action, okay, it's nice, all right, let's move on.
Well, one question I had, it's 8.99 for me, but it's about almost exactly, I don't know how it's about a quarter of the way through the second page of this chapter, or in the beginning of that second page,
Hmm.
where Egwene, he's talking to Egwene in his head.
Hmm.
And the way it's written, it actually is written as if it's her
Hmm.
after she died.
That's actually my note here as well. Is are these their actual voices? Because with Tam, you could see that as he's remembering, because these are things that Tam has said to him,
Hmm.
right? But with Egwene, it's, oh, well, wait a minute, is that actually her
Hmm.
in this place where he's at? Can he hear her voice? Is she able to? Where's she at? What's going on here? There are some, right off the bat, and again, I think Jordan himself wrote all or most of these Rand sections. So this would be something he did, and he did intentionally. And it did make me go, what's going on here? And what's he trying to say? With not not even with the substance of what she's saying, because there's some interesting thoughts there, but just with her voice, that jumped out at me immediately as of, wait a minute, that seems like that's actually her. That's not a voice in his head. That's not something he's remembering,
Otherwise, he's completely schizophrenic and has two voices in his head. You know.
which was something we talked about ad nauseum as nerds in the dorm lounge and on the forums of what is going on with Luce Theron's voice. Is that real? Is he
Hmm.
schizophrenic? Is that a voice in his head? And now we're right back to it. And actually, that leads me to a, well, maybe, because it turns out the voice was real, but that didn't make it any better as far as losing your dang mind,
Hmm.
because it was a essentially kind of a fragment of the pattern that should have been sealed off from him. Well, he's kind of in the pattern right now, where he's in that, the title the title of chapter 38, the place that was not.
Hmm.
I mean, he's in this strange place that isn't, but is everywhere and everything. So she's not gone. Her pattern wasn't burnt out of the her thread wasn't burnt out of the pattern. Um, and so it could be that somehow he's tapped into this thread that is hers, and she's able to speak to him, which then leads you into the, so what are souls and where do they go if they're not hanging out in the world of dreams like those that are bound to the horn.
Yeah, so he's basically around all these threads of the pattern. Is a thread still there? Or is there an essence that will become a thread again?
Mhm. Yeah, because the whole this is something he gets into in his own mind here in this chapter is the whole idea of death and rebirth of no, we get to keep fighting, we keep going on because we're going to do it again, and maybe this time we'll do it better.
Hmm. Uh, do you have any more on that? Because I have an interesting kind of.
Well, the other I, again, why further confirmation in my mind that this is actually Jordan himself is this is just barely over a page, you know, before it cuts to before it cuts away back to the fields of Merrillor for a second. And just in this very brief time, there's a lot going on here. This is very meaty because the first thing that jumped out of us was Egwene's voice because it's so obvious. It's someone speaking. You go, hey, where did that come from? But there's also a lot of depth here philosophically because what they're actually talking about is Tam's phrase, let go. The Aiel phrase that Egwene is kind of echoing here, which is embrace death. And so very economically, but very profoundly, Jordan is saying something about what those mean beyond simple quips. Rand is going to basically, quote the Borderlander saying, which is a, a, a Japanese saying, comes from a Japanese saying of from samurai lore. Essentially, is where Jordan got it of duty is heavier than a mountain, death is lighter than a feather. Of he's showing what these sayings actually mean and how and why Rand is able to stand up against the Dark One because he isn't just acting out on these ideas, he has internalized these ideas. I actually have a I just a an analogy came to just popped into my mind. Um so I'm watching a new Korean show that I found on Netflix. I actually found it when I was in Korea and then I didn't think it would still be available because I thought it was only showing up because I was in Korea. It's called A Clean Sweep, and the whole idea is this guy put together this team of retired baseball players who think they've still got a little left in the tank to play. So it's all late 30s to early 40s guys from the Korean baseball organization. And then a couple of younger guys to round out the team who were like bubble guys that weren't sure they were going to be drafted or they weren't able to get into the KBO and they're playing in an independent league or something like that. And something that one of the opposing managers pointed out in one of the recent games is that, yeah, they don't have the athleticism they used to have when they were playing in their prime or even at the end of their careers. They don't have that athleticism anymore, but the knowledge didn't go anywhere. So you see in their actions that they're able to react more efficiently than his younger players. Why? Well, because all of those lessons are deeply internalized
Mhm.
because they played for so long. I mean, you're talking about guys who possibly by middle school, definitely by high school, knew, hey, this is probably what I'm going to do for a living. And they did it and they did it and they did it and they drilled and drilled and drilled and they thought about it and they worked on it. And then after all these years of experience, um, is actually where we're going to end today because we're going to end with Tom, and he has this thought about decades of experience and how that internalizes and helps you react. Is you don't have to actively think about it because you spent so much time thinking about it before, and now it is instinct,
Mhm.
which is so much of what a lot of the themes of what Jordan was writing about, especially with the three boys, was all about. is learning to be instinctual, but training your instincts to be right.
So I forgot about that little paragraph, but if we're going to the second part of Rand in that first
Mm-hmm.
chapter, I noticed something interesting, and there's a lot of things that it could mean or it could mean nothing. But if it's a Jordan written section, it probably means something.
Mm-hmm.
So further down, when right after the Dark One says, I will destroy you, or I destroy them,
Mm-hmm.
that next paragraph, the Dark One was not a being. It was darkness between the darkness between lights, between moments, between eye blinks. Fast forward to almost the end of that little section. Rand in his head says he felt peace. The peace at this is after he's embracing the void.
Mm-hmm.
The peace of a single drop of water hitting the pond, the peace of moments, the peace between eye blinks, the peace of a void. The darkness between eye blinks, the peace between eye blinks is embracing the void, embracing this place without the emotion of the dark one. Because the void is a place where the disruptions are the things that get in the way.
I think you're onto something there too, because remember previously, one of the ways the Dark One tried to tempt Rand was, this is the void you so often seek. This is nothingness. This is what you do, right? Well, no, this isn't what I do. This is part of what I do. And I do it for different reasons. I think you're onto something, because then I think this is going to be explored deeper in the next Rand section,
Well,
where
and
he is more directly confronting Shaitan.
where do the emotions go when he's creating the void? Into a candle, into light.
Mm, that's a good point. That's we are at the very end here, and we are going all the way back to the very beginning, because one of the first things Jordan does with Rand to not only show us who Rand is, but also kind of teach us where he came from, because Tam is the one who taught him this, is he gets startled, he gets nervous, and he seeks the flame in the void. And now we're ending with that.
Mm-hmm. And
But
when he achieves it, we see in the second book, it enhances his sight to what is real.
and it's what he needs here in this place that is not.
Mhm.
Um yeah, I don't want to flagellate the deceased equine too much, but Matt running off leading the charge here like Aragorn at the end of Return of the King is somewhat diminished in my mind by the silliness of all the previous Matt charging off like a dingleberry.
Mm-hmm.
Um we've beat that dead horse plenty. Um
Let's see.
and then the chapter 39, we're still, it's odd the way these chapters are broken up. And to your point, how the freaking 200-page chapter wasn't broken up when it could have been. Um, but the chapter breaks are an element to Jordan's storytelling. The titles and the iconography of it meant something, which is why I wonder why he chose, because I have to think that was part of Jordan's outlining of how things were supposed to go, is that the last battle is ludicrously long, and the you know, actually, now that I think about it, I'm flipping forward. Okay. Yeah, the start, the symbol for the last battle is the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai, the yin yang symbol.
Mm-hmm.
So I do find that interesting, and I had forgotten that this is the only time that he does this, where he inserts a bit of something before a chapter instead of in the prologue or in the epilogue, as he usually does, to set up and then close the book. Is that he opens the last battle with a passage from Loyal's book on the Third Age. And so that may be one of the reasons he did it the way he did. But anyway, um, those who fight, and the symbol is the horn. So we know what we're getting here.
No, because I was going down he was describing people and you could tell who they
Yes,
were, except one I didn't get. A woman who had given her life, then had it returned. Oh, Maureen, never mind. I
Moraine.
still did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It came to me as I was reading it out loud. It did not come to me as I was reading in the silence last night. But all the others were pretty easy.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting that it opens with Rand saying, "Here's your flaw, Lord of the Dark, Lord of Envy, Lord of Nothing. Here is why you fail. It was not about me. It's never been about me." And the interesting thing to me is he's telling that to him, but he himself just learned that lesson. But
Hmm.
he had been learning it. That is something that he had been working on, sometimes or most of the time really unconsciously. That's a lot of what Min was for Rand, was as a kind of constant reminder. It's not just about you, dummy. That was a big part of what she was. uh and then he goes through the list of people, um and ends, he goes through this list in his head. um the fight isn't about a victory in battle, taking me. It was never about beating me. It was about breaking me. Um, I'm about to get distracted, and I'm trying not to go off on a tangent and finish
Yeah.
my thought. What are your thoughts on this back and forth, this confrontation with Rand and the Dark One?
Well, I mean, it's not about me. It's never been about me. When you have the great debate, what is happiness?
Mm-hmm.
What is a good life? What is life satisfaction? If people would actually get out of their own head and see the pattern, it's actually things you do for the future and others, not things you do for yourself. Yes, you're doing it for yourself, but yourself is fulfilled by the other thing. The fulfillment is what you did for yourself. Let's take making money, for example, for the easy non-political example, right? Making money. People who make money to make money are completely miserable in the end.
Mm-hmm.
People who make money to build something, to have a family, to take care of their family, be to give back after they've made money to the community, to do all of these other things, and they make money for those other reasons instead of making money to make money, are content and happy because the reward your body and mind reward you for that. You get an initial dopamine hit when you get that big check, but it's short lived. You might as well have taken a sniff of coke, right? But if you do it for these other reasons, then there is a contentment to it. There is a long term satisfaction that goes with it. So this is kind of a life lesson in general, and Rand is figuring it out. Only he's doing it on the meta level because he's responsible for every turning of the age.
Um, the other interesting thing that jumped out at me as we kind of go back and forth here between Rand and Matt, and where Matt's point of view really mostly just to show us this connection between the fighting that's still going on there at the fields of Merrillor and this confrontation with Rand and the Dark One. Um, but the thing that was interesting to me was down here. We're a couple of pages in, where in Matt's point of view, it starts with Matt squinted, the battle seeming to dim around him. Um, So very wrong, Shaitan. Rand's voice whispered in Matt's mind. Then the voice was no longer in Matt's mind. It could be heard distinctly by everyone on the battlefield. And I love that because we've come full circle again. So much of what was set up so early on and what we have here is kind of a mirror of when Rand first revealed himself.
Hmm.
And he's having that fight in the sky against Balzamon above, I almost said Ibudar. No, Falm. That's where that was. uh,
Yeah,
and this is
couple
something
thousand miles
similar.
difference there.
Yeah, a little bit. And this is something similar, only it's a voice that everyone is hearing. For a moment, everyone is hearing this confrontation between the dragon and the dark one. Um, which is necessary because the dark one is trying to press his will down in this moment to take away, you know, to to strike at the light and at Rand personally by striking at Matt. And I like I also like the way that um Rand doesn't Rand saves Matt indirectly because but with this attack against Matt from the Dark One, and I like that the point he makes isn't, I'm going to fight you, I'll stop you doing this, or he just points out, hey, you missed something there. Yeah, that guy that you thought you had killed, he ain't dead yet. He still fights. And I like that Lan is that symbol of, you know, the fight continues because that's his entire thing from when we first meet him. The one man army against the dark. That the warrior with the never ending battle that he can never win.
Hmm.
So as much as I have griped about how I think it could have been done differently and better in this moment, and this may be a big reason why Jordan chose Lan as the one to do this, is this symbolism in this moment of, yeah, that one man fight against the shadow still goes on,
Hmm.
and that as an inspiration to everybody to keep going. What I don't like, and where I a second ago I almost got off on a tangent and now I will, is that Sanderson's inability to write coherent action. All of these chapters here, and through the last battle chapter, I'd pointed out times where I thought he did better than usual as far as writing the action and it being good and cinematic and being able to see it in your head and all that. It gets lost and confused here. And I don't know how much of it is simply the rapid back and forth between points of view, but there were a number of times where I said, wait, what? Like little things like I didn't even realize Matt was on his horse. Where did Pips come from? When did that happen? There are times where it seems like he's teleporting off and on and
Hmm.
back and forth. And you're like, how did he get here? What happened? And so the action kind of gets muddled and confused, which I think takes away from some of these moments
Well, and
because
here's the thing. This you said this. I think this is why Lan was the one to do this. We can still take everything we thought was Jordan's writing with Rand and the Dark One and have a storyline where Matt was the one that killed uh Demandred because you would have just started this part earlier, had the battle with Matt making his way to the top of the hill, and about one thing you said you were wrong, so very wrong, and then have the little over section. And instead of Matt squinting his eyes and Land comes up with the body, it is the moment Matt throws the dice and does a risky move to beat Demandred and cuts off his head.
mhm.
And that could have been it because there's also a little bit of a hole there. The Dark One would have known if Land was actually dead because he knows everybody who's dead.
We don't know exactly how that works, but yeah,
He
seems
he
like
knew
it
them
to
as they
me.
were happening as Rand was filling them. So it's
Yeah. Um,
and it would have been a shorter chapter.
yes. Um,
And you wouldn't have had all the muddled battles because the muddled battles are
mhm,
basically Sanderson trying to get Matt back to where he needs to be for this scene to happen.
mhm. Um, I have thoughts about Elaine, but we'll save that
Oh no,
for a
no.
second.
I have to yell.
Okay, because my yelling was going to come at the beginning of the next chapter,
Oh,
where, but
mine was too. Mine was too. Okay, yeah. This it's
okay.
the next Elaine section.
So we'll connect these Elaine sections here where Birgit Silverbow shows back up, standing over her own dead body, which is cool. But we'll get into the what's not cool. Um, I do find it interesting that I had forgotten this bit where there's a moment where Matt goes, "Oh crap, who sounded the horn?" And he's saying, you fight for the light of the shadow. And Hawkwing's, we would never fight for the shadow. But I was told, Matt began, you were told wrong. I I love that. That is so very Jordan. Of yeah, this thing that I led you to believe was incontrovertibly true. No, it's just that the people saying it believed it was true. It wasn't ever actually true. Damn you, man. Um,
Yeah, but it would make you even this is one of those where an untruth can be helpful because it would make you be extra careful.
mhm, mhm.
If it got in the hands of the shadow and you're like, yeah, we'll go get it later. We got
Uh,
bigger fish to fry. That's not a good thing.
my last thought on the chapter is I did want to say, for all of my grumbling about how I wasn't too happy with most of those Oliver scenes earlier, that whole Oliver and Fael section, storyline made me go quite a bit. But I do love the close of this chapter, the final line of this chapter.
It saved it
Suddenly,
because I was
Oliver
kind of
felt
like
a deep
blah with
warmth.
Noel. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
he had
saved it.
lost so many people, but one had come back for him, and it was Jane Farstrider being added to the Heroes of the Horn. Because by golly, if anyone deserves it, it would be that guy
Hmm.
and all that he's been through. And,
But why
him
not
going
Uno?
after
Uno would have
Oliver.
been so cool,
Please shut up.
especially a really short Uno with a stupid eye patch.
Oh, it hurts my brain so much.
That's the other part
Eh,
of it. We talk about casting that was meant to piss off the audience. I bet you that was one of them. Could you have picked a worse Uno than the one they got? This
it
was
would be
this
hard.
was this was worse than race swapping. You took an iconic person who's supposed to be one of the best warriors, horsemen on the field. He's described as being very large for a Shinaran. He's all of these things, and you just basically you didn't race swap him. You just made him the opposite in every other way.
Turn him into an angry midget. Yeah.
Yeah. And one that I'm pretty sure doesn't curse in his normal everyday life because it was so awkward coming out of his mouth.
Well, I think what it was he or they or all of them didn't understand the curses. And so it was like cursing in a foreign language and you don't actually know what the words mean, and so it comes off weird, or it's like a kid saying it for the first time and not actually knowing why that's a bad word, right? To me, I wonder if that's what it was. Because yeah, it seemed, oh well, he's supposed to say these things, so let's insert all these lines, but none of them had any meaning.
Well, they should have just had him read John McWhorter's book, Nine Nasty Words, where he does a history of cursing to open it up. Oh, wait, they can't read John McWhorter anymore. He's problematic.
He is very problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
um you've distracted me with nonsense.
Chapter 4.
Ah, Elaine, that's right. Yeah, now back to my notes and why I'm so annoyed. So connecting these two sections here, because chapter 40 opens up with Elaine and her being rescued here. But going back for a minute, uh Millard knelt beside Elaine, pressing the medallion against her head to stop her from channeling. Blah 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 blah. Um she would find a way to escape this. She had to shake free of the medallion. Of course, if she did, there would still be a channeler. But if she could evade the medallion, then strike quickly, blah 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 blah. Um, she tried to concentrate, but she could only think that Brigitte had been right all along. It was fully possible for the babes to be safe, as Min had foretold, while Elaine herself was left dead. And then she's immediately saved when a silver arrow comes out of nowhere and shoots through Millar's chest. And as I was reading the opening of chapter 40 and this obnoxious back and forth that she has with Brigitte about I've got to ride forward and show my troops that I'm still alive, it just occurred to me why it's so awful is that you can connect these two parts and there is absolutely no comeuppance, no humility, no self-reflection. There is just the briefest of thoughts in this most dire of moments. For anyone who does not have children, you will just have to imagine the most dire of moments is your child is about to be taken from you, possibly killed.
Well, if it's any consolation, the massive oxytocin release that bonds a woman to her children actually doesn't happen till childbirth itself. So she's still not that connected with them.
No,
I
that
mean,
doesn't help.
this is real life.
That doesn't help at all. No. And then she just gets to stand up and be cool and queen bee and go riding into battle. I mean, literally, here in a second, she's going to be swinging a sword around.
Yeah, and that's the moment I said, and her
And
reasoning for it, I'm just like, you could have lobbed the fireball over your troop's head, and then everybody looks back at what did it and see the queen. That would work.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And they would be convinced as her and not an actress because she just lobbed the fireball.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Her there is a logic to the nonsense that she is doing, and it certainly makes sense in her head, but at no point, except there, that's why I went back and read that bit, except for that very brief moment, does reality ever intrude on her logic, her own internal logic, and say, yeah, the real world is ugly and doesn't necessarily care what you think, honey. And you are going to get yourself killed along with the thousands of innocents or people that are fighting for you that you have already gotten killed with your stupidity.
Yeah, and well, it's also the reasoning behind it too, because you can tell we're getting to an age of wokeness with the Sanderson writing. Because what was her reason for using the sword and not just making herself known?
To shame the men who were running away.
To shame the men who were running away. It wasn't just to let them know their queen lived. It wasn't to rally them. It was to shame them into action.
Whereas a display of the one power, to your point, would have rallied
Mm-hmm.
because, oh, she is alive and, burning Trollocs with the one power.
And she's helping a lot more than she did with the sword.
Hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we switch to Avienda and Elias, which is kind of a cool moment. Um, and it's also a showing, kind of a reinforcing what Rand was talking about, because even the wolves know that their fight is hopeless. So why do you fight? Why do you? As Elias basically says to Avienda, why are you charging if you know it's hopeless? Why do you fight when you know it's hopeless? You know, we're buying time for Rand, and we're fighting so that the Shadow knows, by golly, we're still alive, and we're gonna go down swinging. Um, and then we get to the stupid moment with Elaine swinging the stupid sword.
Mhm.
Um,
I did like Brigitti's answer to it, even though it was kind of silly banter, because it's right. I feel like I needed to move to a to bloody move to another country, one
mm-hmm,
where monarchs don't have pudding for brains.
mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, that's actually the right answer.
And but that's also why the Elaine sections have so increasingly annoyed us, is because Brigitte is absolutely right about pudding for brains, and yet Elaine never suffers the consequences. Or when she does suffer consequences, she ignores it and just keeps pressing forward. And but somehow is able to come out the other side unscathed. Not so much all the people around her, but at least she comes out unscathed.
Yeah. Again, how many of her front line less would have died if, a dozen Trollocs were blasted?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, then the Sanshin finally show up, which is nice. Um, oh yeah. And then we get to the end, which is Jur Grady looking at the dammed up river and thinking about all these poor people who were let through and just died.
Yeah, I'd
And he
forgotten about
opens the
that scene.
gateway,
See,
and the people of Hinterstap come back.
that was one of the better written scenes from this section that we're
Yes.
going through.
Better written, however, I don't know whose fault this was, but it was too clever by half. Rather than going, I went, because as we talked about when it happened, there was no reason for the Hinterstap crap to take, was it 3 or 4 chapters?
Yeah.
It was way too damn long just to get to this point, is all we're doing here. Is all of that was to basically have this moment. You could have made the point much simpler and much better. And so by having a flubbed setup, it weakens even a really good payoff. Uh, and then my only note for chapter 41 is stuff happens.
Let's see.
Um, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of back and forth. Um, and you've got Logain kind of being a psycho.
Well,
Uh,
at least in that section with Logan, you get in his head where he's wondering what's wrong with himself.
yeah, there is a moment there, but we start with, I think we're in oh yeah, we're in Andrel's point of view. Uh, I do like that Andrel decides, no, you know what? We're not going to go look for this stupid scepter, and we're not disobeying orders because he gave us an order way back at the beginning. Well, I think he's probably forgotten about that. I don't care. It's still an order, and we still have renegade Ashaman dreadlords to go find. So let's go do that because that actually matters. And I do like the way they actually do it. To me, the most interesting part about this chapter, the only thing that really kind of jumped out at me was here in the beginning. After that, it switches to Malkidian's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of cool. And she assumes the form of Demandred to rally the troops. And one of the reasons she does it is because she has failed yet again. Because she got run out of where she was supposed to be, which was with the Sanshin, manipulating them, keeping tabs on them. But she has this interesting thought that the Dark One doesn't know everything. And so if the Dark One hasn't learned about my failure yet, well, then by the time the Dark One does, if I have achieved these great successes, then it'll be fine. And he won't punish me for that because I've managed to turn things around by assuming the form of Demandred and then leading the armies to great victory.
Yeah, this is actually your statement brings a meta thought to mind from the whole series, and this is Jordan and Sanderson.
Uh-huh.
There were some inconsistencies on what the Dark One did know. Because there were times when it showed his ignorance, but there were also times where he had no way to know something that happened, but he was still
Mm-hmm.
punishing one of the Forsaken or something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. So yeah, there are times it just seemed a little inconsistent, and we didn't have a good enough pattern to say, well, this is the mechanism behind his knowing.
Yes. And part of that is understandable because Jordan clearly wanted to leave certain elements to the imagination, but also because certain elements are unknowable. I mean, we get that at the very beginning of Rand's confrontation with the Dark One, where he says, this isn't actually what it is, but this is how his mind chose to interpret it.
Mhm.
So there were purposely some elements that were left fuzzy, but the elements that we do know could have had a little harder rules that were more knowable. Um,
But at the end of that little section, to me, it just played out as, we got to do something with Mohidian. We got to close that. We got to square that circle and be done with it.
mhm. Yeah.
When, like you
Well,
said, not everything was meant to be closed, and so it was a to me it was kind of a useless section.
I I also think part of the point was, but I don't think it works, is that the end of the book feels pretty anticlimactic after the battle at the Fields of Merrillor is won. And even at the Fields of Merrillor, even that feels a little anticlimactic after Demandred has been killed. And Sanderson keeps trying to tell us that the battle's not over yet. He keeps trying to, through Matt analyzing things and through Elaine's point of view, keeps trying to tell us that the peril is still too perilous, right? But he doesn't do a good job of showing us. And so it feels anticlimactic. And I think part of the point of Moghidian is to show that the dark is still fighting. The shadow still has powerful resources to draw on. So the light isn't done yet. The fight isn't done yet. It just falls flat. To your point, it just feels kind of tacked on and kind of, okay, sure, whatever. Um, Especially then when we switch to chapter 42, impossibilities. Why is it impossibilities? Because the laws of physics are being unraveled around Thachendar. You're starting to go from this very grounded, real fantasy world that Jordan had created to the fantastical, because you literally have floating rocks.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of high magic craziness that you get in like Faerun, the Forgotten Realms setting. If anyone's nerdy enough to have played, any of the games there or read any of those books, uh, that was never really a part of Jordan's world. We get hints of it in the Age of Legends, and now we see some of this wild craziness. But as he says with the chapter title, and as Avienda thinks looking around, this is nuts. The world is literally falling apart. And that is a better and more important moment of, yeah, we didn't win yet. We won this battle, but we haven't won the war yet because Rand isn't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like either he should have spent just a little more time there at the Fields of Merrillor to really show us instead of tell us that the peril is still too perilous, or, I mean, just fade the black. The good guys are going to win. You know that the hardest part of the battle is done. Matt even thinks, here it is. Here's the hand where I go all in. And then he leads the charge and just fade to black, and then let's not worry about what's happening there until it's done. And let's spend all our time here, because now that that battle is done, now this is what really matters. And I think it kind of gets lost and confused here towards the end.
Yeah,
Um,
near about a page from the end of the Avienda section, when she's thinking in her head that it's talking about how it's not just a bubble of evil, it's actually Rand and the Dark One's battle going on,
mhm.
affecting the world. And she talks about the clouds above forming the pattern of the Aes Sedai symbol. And I think this is to tell us, in a way, that even the Age of Legends Aes Sedai had it wrong all along. The yin yang wasn't about male and female. The yin yang symbol was about a balance of light and dark,
Order and chaos.
order and chaos. Yeah.
Mhm. Good point.
Because if it's
Um,
a male and female thing, it should be a Venn diagram with an overlap in the middle, right?
well, we know they were fallible.
But
I mean,
Kamala Harris
we
also
can see
likes
it.
Venn diagrams, remember?
Please stop. Um, what was my actual note on this chapter? I do, I did some griping, credit where it's due. I do think Sanderson writes Avienda pretty well. It's one of the character voices that he pulls off better than others. And so her sections are good. Um, and I think he does a good job of really making you feel the roller coaster of emotions there, because you go from the high of feeling that connection, that bond with Rand, and you know that helping her continue the fight, and then you end with this horrified trembling. She reached down and pulled aside the veil. It was Rourke. And I think he does a pretty good job of really making you, the reader, feel those emotions because she's feeling them so strongly. Um, and it's a damn shame, but it was a good ending for a great character, you know. Um, but the thing that made me chuckle and kind of jumped out at me here was then we get to a kind of a lengthy section um, that's kind of cool because it's from one of the bad guys' point of view, Mishrael, and Alviarin is apparently second in charge, which is interesting. And the Ashaman doesn't understand, why is this woman in charge of us? Well, because she kind of ranks high among the dark. But I love the way they get them by getting them to chase them into this steading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I love the Ogier elders' response here to, these are very dangerous people, good Ogier, Andril said. Do not underestimate how devious they can be. The Ogier chuckled, limping towards the steading, still beautiful trees. Men assume that because we are calm, we cannot be devious ourselves, she said. Let them see how crafty a mind can become with centuries worth of aging upon it. Do not worry, Master Androl, we will be careful. And then I love this final line. Um, it will be well for these poor souls to live in the peace of the steading. Perhaps a few decades of peace will change their outlook on the world. There, to me, there's a couple levels of yikes there. Are these dreadlords actually going to be held captive in the steading for decades? And if so, would that actually work?
Maybe it could.
It really makes me wonder, and we're never going to get to revisit this, obviously, but a thought that jumps into my head that I would be curious about, you know, asking the author if I could, is what would that do to the guy who was turned? Because one of them in here is one of the guys that was turned.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that would do anything to help that person. because we just don't know enough about the mechanism of that.
Hmm.
So who knows? Maybe.
Well, because I wonder because Murdraw were used to
Hmm.
create that deep, dark spot in their brain, but Shadow Spawn cannot enter the steady. Does that
Yeah.
deep spark dark spot go away?
Yeah. Does something happen to that? Will something happen to that when the dark one is sealed away for real this time?
Mhm.
But it's something I'm gonna have to dig around at some point and see if he ever addressed it before his death. But to me, that's an interesting thought of, hey, what happens to those people after?
Yeah, about the sealing the dark one away, because there was a time where he was sealed before all this started with this end of the age. But we get from Issam's point of view that the red Aiel have been being made that way for
Hmm. Hmm.
quite some time. So the seal might not have anything to do with it if it can be done before the seals were breaking.
It's true. Um, I was done here with chapter 42, but then I happened to glance down, and so now something jumped out at me that I had a thought that goes back to where we started here, which is, wait, is that actually Rand's voice? Because we switched back to Avienda, and she's trying to collect herself after this traumatic moment of, I just killed Vark. And she keeps telling herself, it's better that way. He was already dead. He was just a husk. He was just a shell. All right, well, you can tell yourself that all you want, but this is like a father figure to her, as well as being her clan chief.
Mhm.
This is a big effing deal.
As well as his wife is fighting just a few feet away
Mm-hmm.
and didn't know.
His wife is my mentor, and I just killed her husband. And yeah, it was just a shell. He was already dead, but I just killed him. And so you can tell yourself all you want, but the mind and the heart don't always get along, and sometimes one can overpower the other. And but then strength avienda, and it's in italics, so it's a voice. Is that her talking to herself in the third person, or Rand's determination filled her, radiating from her the bond at the back of her mind? Was that actually Rand? I wonder. I mean, because we did just see him whispering in everybody's mind. Is he able to send is a portion of his consciousness that's able to see all that's going on, able to help his lady here? I wonder.
Yeah, I think it's a little less clear on this one than
Hmm.
it is in others, but
Yeah,
it's a good thought to have, and I think we actually have the freedom as the reader to interpret it that way if that
yeah.
makes it more dramatic for you, which is one good thing about books. Sometimes they are vague like that, so that your interpretation
Hmm.
makes it the best possible story for you.
Yeah. And then she gets all super cinematic with her superhero pose as she leaps up and stabs Big Ugly Grendel.
Which I think would have been more effective had she just grabbed Rourke's spear and not let herself be known to Grendel by channeling.
All right, so then we go to A Field of Glass, chapter 43. And this is, you'd reference this. This is Logain's point of view, and he's thinking, because he has this back and forth with Gabrielle, who's not exactly approving of what he's doing here, because she recognizes, as she says, you aren't looking to its future, talking about the Black Tower. You're looking to make certain you are a power in these lands, Logain. Light, he'd resisted their attempts to corrupt him, turn him to the shadow, but he couldn't help wondering if they had broken something else inside of him, something profound. And I have to think, I just had this thought of, yeah, they broke your empathy, because that's what separates you from the shadow. And look at the kid that they turned,
Hmm.
when he was trying to when he was talking to Androl, and no, it'll be better this way. It's better. no empathy. There's no empathy there of you're going to suffer. You're going to have your mind, your will broken and be forced to do something. And there's no there. There's no recognition. And I think that matters because then connecting that to how this section ends, which is Andril begging Logain, come help. You know, the rear area is being overrun by Trollocs and we're too tired to fight. And his plea, please, Andril whispered so soft, children, Logain, they're slaughtering the children. And that is like the height of human empathy of they don't even have to be your children, but if you are a decent human being, then children, the weakest and most innocent of us, suffering should do something to you.
There's one above that. They're eating the dogs.
Uh, well, I think that actually leads to it. Why do we love dogs so much, and why do people get so pissed off with Michael Vicks of the world, people who are because there's an identification there that a puppy is a lot like a baby. You know, the big eyes, the helplessness, the just wanting to cuddle with you. And, you know, compared to a human, what's it gonna do if you abuse it, you know?
Yeah, and I can't remember. I never fully researched it, but there were some things that came out about 15 years ago that apparently dogs are the only animal on the planet other than humans that a human can look into their eyes and feel some of those same chemical
Hmm.
releases that are in that bonding experience.
Yeah. And the kids thing, you triggered something earlier, and I can't even remember what you were saying that made me think about this of I think I may have referenced this before, but I can't remember who it was, but it was some, kind of blogger type person who had been writing about these things and been talking about these things, but had just recently become a parent and was like, holy crap, I didn't realize how deep this issue is. But the falling demographics in the West, if you don't have kids, then why do you care about the future? So we're culturally nihilistic because we have no future. It's the movie what was that movie? Children of Men, where just for some reason people stop having babies
Hmm.
and they can't figure it out, but humankind is coming to an end because it isn't being replaced and everyone is just nihilistic and pathetic. There's no there. There's no reason. And that is the appeal here of Androl to Logain of knock knock, that empathy is still in there somewhere. And as with that exchange with Gabrielle is you say you're looking to the future, but really what you want is power. Well, here's the future, literally. Here's the future, the children. And they're being slaughtered by Trollocs. Are you going to do anything about it?
Hmm.
You know.
We can't say he's lost all of those kind of feelings because otherwise he wouldn't be regretful of
Yes.
of
Yes.
feeling Gabrielle's feelings for him.
But it was damaged somehow
Hmm.
in that attempt to break him. And that is what has made him harder and darker. Uh
Then we're back to Matt describing the Shanshan fighting.
mhm.
Uh,
And he's feeling this tugging. He knows he's got to go help Rand. Um, I do like that he finishes Hawkwing. He finishes his section telling Hawkwing. Well, first of all, I love the uh do you know the Sanshin? And I love Hawkwing's answer. I am familiar with them. There's no, there's no description there. It's just his line, and yet you can feel the uncomfortableness there. And so there's a lot of inferences to be made. So I love that. And then I think their empress would very much like to make your acquaintance. If you could go speak to her, I'd appreciate it. And if you do, kindly tell her I sent you. Yeah, I like that. Um, and then we get to back to the Rand and the Dark One. And Rand is, you can tell the fight is coming to its end, whatever, however that is. But you can tell from the way Rand is standing up to him and the way he's on the offensive now. It was the Dark One trying to unmake Rand, trying to break him, and now Rand is on the offensive. Um, and I had to laugh because the first thing to pop in my head, which for me it's page 851, which is just this page full of all caps because it's Rand speaking in all caps, which is kind of confusing because then the Dark One speaks and you're like, wait, who's talking here? Um, I love his attack on the Dark One of, when have you ever inspired the best in men? You cannot. It is outside your power. Your minions will never fight on when hope is lost. They will never stand because doing so is right. It is not strength that beats you, it is nobility. Uh, and this is where he says, Rand says, I oh, I do, Shaitan, Rand says softly. I embrace it, for death is and always has been lighter than a feather. Death arrives in a heartbeat, no more tangible than a flicker of light. It has no weight, no substance. Death cannot keep me at bay, and it cannot rule me. So this is just putting the exclamation point on what it means to embrace death. This is Rand demonstrating that he has fully understood this. But what made me laugh is, in this scene, what popped into my head was, evil will always triumph because good is dumb. The wisdom of Dark Helmet.
Well, that
Um,
actually plays into the note I had for this little section because before the all caps, Rand is thinking to himself, however, Trollocs fought only because the Murdral forced them. On its own, a Trolloc would no more fight something stronger than a fox would attempt to kill a lion. So he's actually implying even there, Trollocs aren't even inherently evil. But when we get to you, your last word was because good is dumb. It's actually the intellect that makes it evil and not just nature.
mhm.
It's the actual conscious will to do it, which the Murdral possess, and the Murdral, you know, the Murdral would be evil no matter what. Trollocs would just be trying to eat, and they wouldn't pick a fight with something they couldn't win against, just like any other animal.
The I think what made me think of Dark Helmet there was the line about nobility, because that can be very dumb. That can sometimes lead us to do dumb things. But at its core, that's also what makes us do great things. Rand's whole point there is that, yeah, we keep fighting when it seems like all hope is lost because that's what we are. That's who humanity is when it's at its best. And yeah, we don't always achieve that because we're not always our best, but at least we have the chance to. Your minions can't. They are incapable of that. And you're incapable of this, inspiring them to aspire, because you don't even understand it. It is beyond your nature. It's back to the previous one where whereas you pointed out, where Rand finally fully understands the nature of the Dark One and what that is, which is what leads him here, is um at going back to even before you, the very beginning of this section. You think I will retreat? The Dark One asked. I never expect you to retreat, Rand said. I believe you incapable of it. I wish you could see, could know why it is you continue to lose. Um, and then we get Avienda and Grendel fighting on a floating rock, which will get resolved later. So
Yep.
whatever. Um,
Fading to black.
Chapter 44, Two Craftsmen. Um, the first thing that jumped out at me here was this exchange Perrin has with Chiad that I love for a couple of reasons. One, because she is echoing what Rand has been not only saying but showing, how he's learned the lesson of honor and embracing death, as she says here, with Perrin once again kind of echoing Berlane of it's the last frickin' battle. Put off the white at least for a little bit, then you can put it back on. It doesn't make sense to Perrin why she would continue to do this in the last freaking battle of all times. What good is honor if the Dark One wins the last battle? Perrin snapped, pulling up his trousers. It is everything, Chiad said softly. It is worth death. It is worth risking the world itself. If we have no honor, better that we lose. It's just what Rand was saying. It's just this is just a tangible application to Rand's philosophical thought.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I love about this is in this back and forth, Perrin realizes, well, actually, no, I I would just do it different. There are things that I feel like that about.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think putting on a white robe and being submissive is silly. So that part I don't understand, but I do understand the sentiment because there are things that I feel that strongly about too.
Well, this echoes back to this has been a theme going through here. Of course, this echoes back to Rain and Isla talking, where Rain is saying, "Yeah, we do this, but other people do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our way is good, but there are other goods."
Um, I feel like I should have thoughts about his conversation with Master Luhan.
Well, to me, just my big major meta thought on it was it's actually a shorter version of Tam's talk with Rand.
Mm,
Just a different lesson, but it was the lesson that that child needed to learn. And actually, we get that to Matt from one of the heroes. He doesn't get it from Abel. He gets it from one of the heroes,
mm.
which is the yes. Remember, he saved you twice. That's
Yeah,
what
I
Matt
kind of
needed to
skipped over
know.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. That was kind of a big deal
and
that I
notice
kind of skipped over.
notice those talks all lead to the tripod in the last battle because Rand needed to talk to fight the fight he's fighting. Matt needed to talk to. Well, we're about to get to. Did he already write off? Yeah, he already wrote off. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
he got the talk to go do what he needed to do, and Perrin is getting the talk that no, you actually do need to do this because your problem is you're too restrained, and this is the time to not be restrained.
Yeah, that no, yeah, that's a good point because that is exactly let go, but let go of something else for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, is what's happening here. Um, no, the thought I had was after that because this goes to kind of what I was grumbling about with the anticlimactic feeling is the end of this section, which for me is page 858. The end of this parent section is where I think it needed more. We needed more focus here and we needed to see more because when he shifts into the wolf dream in the flesh, which is really cool, and also really subtle because I love that he just as he's leaving, he hears this briefest of gasp from Missouri because yeah, she's gonna go, what the hell was that? You know, a man who can't channel just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. Um, so I love the understatedness of it. But then when he gets into the wolf dream, I pointed this out before when he was fighting against Slayer, that the the storm of the Dark One is much, much stronger in the world of dreams. And I find that interesting. I find that telling. I don't know exactly what Jordan is telling us, but he's definitely telling us something.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that here. Let me find it. Da, 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 da. He opened his eyes and dropped into buffeting winds. He created a pocket of calm air, then hit the ground beneath with strengthened legs. Only a few teetering walls remained of Berelane's palace on this side. One of those broke apart, the stone shattering and pulled into the sky by the winds. The city beyond was mostly gone, heaps of rock here and there indicating where buildings had once stood. The sky groaned like bending metal. So it feels like we've won. All the people, everybody else in the waking world, at least those not on Thakandar, who we're about to see from Tom's point of view, is boy howdy, are they in trouble. But they feel like, okay, now what? We've won. Yay, huzzah, the good guys have won. But then you step into the world of dreams and go, oh no, the existential part of things are still very much in the balance. And frankly, right now it looks like the Dark One is winning.
Hmm.
Um, I do want to like just put this out there, and if anyone else has any thoughts on this, this is next time, and then if we have some epilogues talking about this in more depth, I'm still trying to think through and figure out why and put into words why here in the world of dreams. Why is this the place where the Dark One's touch is pretty much running free? This storm that the Windfinders are trying so hard to hold at bay with the Bowl of the Winds in Thekandar, and we also see some elements of it outside. But here in the world of dreams, there's nothing holding it back.
Well, I mean, you see that the merging of the real world and the world of dreams happens
Mm-hmm.
in Shao Gul itself. So it's probably the boring of the whole the boring of the what they called the bore probably went through the world of dreams.
Hmm.
And so it's the intermediary between what is not and what is, or and what we've discussed before and what could be. So just the fact that it's hitting there first would make complete sense.
All right. And then our last section here is Tom, and you had thoughts.
Okay, so it there are decent parts of how it's written, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
agree with you on that. But from the wise works of Tenacious D, this is another moment where it could have faded to black. Exquisite, Tom thought. That's the word. No, that's not really the word. Don't you could have just never told us. You could have had him mulling it over and left
Pigs
it
and
because
mice.
exquisite is a good word, but so were all the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, okay, this Sanderson, you're not the greatest bard of the third age or even of our life here in the real world. Don't try to give the word the poem that is going to be just like when he writes Elaine's speeches and has
Mm-hmm.
her talk in front of her troops and all this, and it's like that wasn't that great of a speech, but you think you're great at it. Just leave it, like Tenacious D did with their song Tribute, the greatest song in the world. Whoa. But it's actually not the greatest song in the world. This is just a tribute to the greatest song in the world. We can't remember the greatest song in the world. I'm writing the greatest ballad in the world. Leave it at that. Leave him mulling over the process.
No, that's a good point, and that really would have made it almost perfect. Is because where we end, where the end of this chapter is, then he returned to his perch and took out a sheet of paper and his pen, and to the thunder, the yells, and the explosion, the howl of the wind, he began to compose. So you could have had him after all of this, after everything that happens in this section, go, I've got it. And then you don't have to tell us what it is.
Yeah.
You just,
You
I've
have
got
him
it.
start writing.
And he starts writing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That that would have made a uh pretty much perfect scene because I thought that credit where it's due. This was a good Tom section. It wasn't perfect. There were moments where, much like with Matt, he takes the jokes, the attempted jokes, a little too far.
Hmm.
And
That was my other problem with it.
to,
Yeah.
to your point, much like he's taking the Tom is the greatest bard maybe ever, certainly of the third age, and we all know that he's great and we all love him. But thinking back, Jordan was able to do that because he doesn't show us that much. We know Tom's a badass. He never shows us assassinating the king. He never even confirms that he did it.
Hmm.
We just know that he did. So again,
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Jordan knew to fade to black and not even, really even reference it again.
Well,
So that
even his first fight with him or draw when he was with the boys,
there was a flash of light and people screaming and they're running away. Yeah.
and they're
You know,
crying because he's dead.
and we don't know what happened. And for,
Beginning of the third book.
almost two books. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's the whole of the second book and then the last half of Eye of the World, and we're into the third book before, holy crap, Bum's alive. No,
Hmm.
wait, no, we do see him in the Great Hunt. I'm a dummy. Yes. Rand finds him in the Great Hunt.
Oh
That's
yeah,
where,
when
yeah,
he
yeah.
when he shacked up with that gal. Yeah.
That was Great Hunt, not Dragon Reborn. I'm a dummy. So it's like almost a full book because we go through the half of the Eye of the World and like the first half of the Great Hunt, and then it's, oh my gosh, it's Tom. Um, so Jordan knew, I mean, for crying out loud, he gave us the term figs and mice. And how often have we referenced that as, yeah, just leave it to the imagination? You know, he, it was, I went down a rabbit hole the other day of something I haven't watched in a while, but I love the show Fool Us with Penn and
Hmm.
Teller, because I love magic, and I especially love guys like Penn and Teller who straight up tell you, I'm lying to you. This is all a trick. And I'm even going to tell you beforehand what I'm doing, and you're still not going to be able to see me do it. I love that. Um, so I went down this rabbit hole of watching Fool Us videos of, I'm gonna see it this time, and no, you never see it. Uh, but that's why we love those kinds of things, is because we know there's a trick, and the magician told us there's a trick, but we can't find the trick. Well, that's what Jordan did with Figs and Mice, is he didn't reveal the trick per se, but he told us he's tricking us.
Hmm.
But he's able to do it so well. But
But this is
it,
Sanderson's pattern. It's actually part of the basis of what annoys us so much about him because he thinks he can write these dramatic speeches
mm,
when they're kind of blah. He thinks he's funny. And then we got the Matt we got in the Ptolemies, we got
yeah,
these this useless banter. He thinks he's funnier than he is, but he's
yes,
not. And he thinks he could come up with this thing that's going to be the most uh the biggest composition of one of the best in the world. And oh, I can
mm-hmm.
I can actually say out loud the right word because that is the perfect word. No, it's not. It
Exactly.
could
But
be.
but it's a little extra frustrating in this scene because he does get the core of the character right. Um, so
Except
we're
when he
kind of
kills the girl. Not when he kills the girl, but when he's bantering in his own head about sacks of potatoes being a
that was one
over.
of the
Yeah,
yes, that was one of the things I was thinking of as an example of when
because
Sanderson
Sanderson
goes too
thought it was
far
funny.
because he thought it was funny.
Mhm.
Um, but there's this moment because there's this italics here. For me, it's page 861, which is the last page of the chapter. This is what you get, old man, he reminded himself, for not knowing when to let go. And this is why he and Matt were so perfect together and why Matt needed Tom. We see him at the beginning of Shadow Rising, of Tom knowing that Matt needs him, and Tom being the one to keep Matt from being too Matt. And we see here, well, that's because Tom sees himself in Matt. So he knows what to do because he knows himself. and this is what I mean, he was glad that he'd not been able to escape, that his attempts to leave Rand, Matt, and the others behind had failed. Would he really have wanted to sit in some quiet inn somewhere while the last battle played out, while she went in there alone? No, of course not, and neither would Matt, damn it. So, what was all that crap earlier? But I digress. He shook his head. This is the line I love, and where I think he gets the core of the character right, even if he misses with some of the details. He was as much a fool as any man or woman. He just had enough experience to recognize it. It took a few seasons before a man could put that together. There you go. He at least understands the core of Tom, much more than that damnable show could manage. I don't know who that was, but it wasn't Tom. I don't know. It was like a Chris Christopherson cosplayer. I don't know what they were doing, but I digress. All right.
So that takes us to chapter 45, which we will start with next
Yep.
time. And we're going to try to bang through the end, probably epilogue too. Epilogues are tough because there's a lot of speculation in
Mm-hmm.
there. But
So we'll see how long it takes us to get through these last chapters to the end, and then we may save any kind of speculation and theorying for a whole epilogue show, because there's gonna be some of that, I think. Um, Speaking of, I didn't think to look to see if we had any comments. Do we have any
nope, no
comments?
comments.
Okay, slackers. All right then. Then that will be it for today, and we will see y'all on Saturday for whatever it is we ramble about.
Yeah, I
I had
actually
a
don't
thought.
know
I
what
don't
we're going
remember
to
what
talk
it
about
was.
this time. But
Um,
yeah.
oh yeah, we might yell about Bibles and prayer in school and people freaking out and losing their minds.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. All
Yeah.
right. That's all I've got.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all then.
All right.